She walked into the ballroom and every head turned. Not because they were expecting her, but because they weren't. She was the cleaning lady. The one people passed by without looking. The one they never invited, not really. But tonight, she came. No mop, no gloves. Just a quiet grace in every step. A deep blue dress that floated like calm water. And eyes that had seen enough to know who was real, and who was pretending. People stared. Some whispered. A few laughed under their breath. Because the truth was, they had invited her as a joke. She won't come, they had said, smirking. But she did. And not to beg. Not to clean. She came to show them who she truly was. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than their laughter. And in that one moment, everything began to change. If you've ever been looked down on, if someone ever doubted your worth, stay with us. This story will remind you why you should never let anyone else define who you are. And if this moment touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. Before the ballroom, before the stares and the whispers, she lived a quiet life. A life few ever noticed. Her name was Rosa. Every morning, she woke before the sun. The streets were still dark, the city half asleep. She would stand by her tiny stove, boiling water for tea. No sugar, no milk, just strong, bitter leaves in a chipped white mug. The kitchen was small, with peeling paint and a creaky floor. But it was hers. And it was enough. She had no car. She walked to work, rain or shine. Her shoes, worn at the heels, knew every crack in the pavement. Rosa cleaned office buildings by day and a hotel by night. She moved through empty halls with quiet grace, vacuumed carpets no one noticed, scrubbed bathrooms that others left behind. She was always careful, always kind. She never rushed even when she was tired, and she was always tired. Her hands told the story. Dry from bleach, fingers rough, nails short. But her movements were gentle. She folded towels like they mattered, wiped mirrors until they shone like new. She never cut corners. No one asked her to care this much, but she did anyway. No one saw her staying late to finish the job right. No one thanked her when they walked into clean, fresh spaces. She didn't expect praise. She only hoped to be treated with respect. She lived alone in a small apartment on the 4th floor, with no elevator. She didn't complain about the stairs. She took them slowly with one hand on the rail. At the top, by the window, she always paused just for a second to look at the sky. Even on the hardest days, she found beauty there. She didn't have much, no family nearby, no fancy clothes, no nights out. But she had her plants. 3 small pots by the window. She talked to them sometimes when the apartment felt too quiet. Just keep going, she would whisper to them. That's all we can do. She had learned that from life. Rosa had lost her husband years ago. Cancer took him fast. They had no children, just each other. When he was gone, the silence in the apartment felt heavy, like a coat she couldn't take off. But she didn't fall apart. She went to work the next morning. And the morning after that. That's who she was. She read books from the library. Not big novels, just simple stories about people like her. She liked happy endings, even if she didn't always believe in them. She wrote little notes to herself. On the fridge. Be kind, even if no one sees it. Clean heart. Quiet mind. Don't stop growing. At work, people barely noticed her. Some forgot her name. Some never learned it. But she remembered theirs. She remembered their coffee orders, their birthdays, their small habits, because she was watching even when they weren't. Sometimes she'd hear jokes, snide comments, things they didn't think she'd catch. She's just the cleaner. She probably sleeps here. She doesn't know anything about real life. Rosa heard every word and swallowed every one. Not out of weakness, out of wisdom. She knew who she was. She knew what they didn't. That worth isn't loud. It doesn't need permission. And it certainly doesn't wear a price tag. So she kept going. Day after day. Night after night. Quietly. Gently. stronger than anyone guessed, until one day an envelope came. It was slipped under the hotel door, a gold seal on thick paper, an invitation to the annual gala, black tie, exclusive guests. She read it twice. She knew it wasn't meant for her. She knew it was a joke, a cruel one, but something inside her shifted. Calm certainty. They may not have meant it, but I'm going. The ballroom shimmered with gold and glass. Music played softly in the background, but no one was dancing. All eyes were still on her, Rosa. She stood near the entrance, her hands folded calmly in front of her. The long navy dress moved gently with her breath. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply stood, as if the room belonged to her, and that made people uncomfortable. Some tried to look away, but kept stealing glances. Others leaned in to whisper behind raised glasses. Is that really her? What is she doing here? She's just the cleaner. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were said out loud without shame. Loud enough for her to hear. And then he stepped forward. Leonard Mallory. Tall, rich, powerful. He was one of the hosts of the event. Slick black suit, polished shoes. The kind of man who believed every room was his to own. He walked right up to her, smiling, but not kindly. It was the kind of smile that came before a cut. Miss Rosa, is it? He said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. We're surprised to see you here tonight. Rosa nodded once. Calm, steady. I received an invitation. Leonard chuckled, shaking his head like a teacher correcting a child. Yes, well, sometimes. Those get sent by mistake. This event is for our donors and partners, you understand. He didn't say people like you, but everyone heard it anyway. I understand, Rosa said quietly. Leonard waited for her to step back, to apologize, to leave, but she didn't move. Instead, she looked him in the eyes. I was invited, and I came. The air shifted. People stopped talking. Even the music seemed quieter. Leonard's smile faded just slightly. Of course, he said. Feel free to enjoy yourself. Just don't touch anything valuable. He turned and walked away, laughing with two other men in tuxedos. Rosa watched him go, then turned her gaze back to the room. She saw the waiter trying not to make eye contact, the woman pretending to check her phone, a young girl near the punch bowl staring wide-eyed with something close to wonder. The tension in the room rose like steam. No one knew what to do next. Rosa walked slowly across the marble floor, her steps soft but sure. She didn't look left or right. She moved with the quiet power of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to show. She picked up a glass of water from the corner table. Her hand didn't shake. In her silence, she was saying something louder than words. I see you. I hear you. But I am not afraid of you. She stood by the tall window now, looking out into the night. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had walked through years of storms and still stood straight. The whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown louder. Some laughed. Some judged. But Rosa didn't change her posture. She didn't shrink. She belonged here not because they said so, but because she did. The tension in the room kept building. People weren't used to someone like her staying calm under their gaze. They weren't used to someone standing still when they tried to push her out with looks and words. But Rosa had spent years learning how to stay strong in silence. She had lived through worse than this. The joke they played was about to become their lesson. And she, quiet, steady Rosa, was about to teach it. The ballroom doors were still open behind her, but Rosa stood firm. Not on a stage, not in a spotlight, but in full view. Leonard Mallory had returned to his circle of guests. He laughed loudly, trying to shift the attention away from her, trying to pull the room back into his hands. But something had changed. People were still watching Rosa. Even the music seemed unsure of itself, soft and distant now, like it no longer fit the moment. Then came the sound, a soft chime of a glass. Excuse me, a voice called out near the center table. Everyone, may I have your attention? It was Mr. Gaines, the hotel owner. Silver-haired, quiet, respected. He stood slowly and tapped his spoon to his glass again. The room stilled. "Before we continue this evening," he said, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special in this room. Someone who most of you see, but do not see." He turned toward Rosa. "Rosa!" A few gasped. A few heads turned quickly. "She has worked in our hotel for 12 years, Mr. Gaines continued. "She's never missed a day, never cut a corner. Guests mention her by name in their reviews. Staff trust her more than their managers. When things fall apart, Rosa puts them back together. Quietly, kindly, always." Rosa's eyes didn't widen. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, still and calm. "Some of you may think she doesn't belong here tonight," Mr. Gaines said, scanning the crowd. "But I personally invited her. And not as a joke." Silence. "I invited her because this evening is meant to celebrate people who make things work. People who build, who give, who lead, not just with money, but with heart." He paused, then added with a small smile, "And I also thought she'd look better in this ballroom than most of us do." Clearly, I was right. A few people chuckled nervously. Some smiled. Others lowered their eyes in shame. Mr. Gaines raised his glass toward Rosa. "To those who are rarely seen, but always needed." Slowly, one by one, others began to stand. A few clapped, then more. Soon the room was filled with applause. Not loud and wild, but steady, respectful. Hands came together not out of pressure, but out of something real. Recognition. Even Leonard, still sitting, looked around, unsure of what to do. His charm had gone quiet. Rosa didn't bow. She didn't wave. She nodded, just once, and took a deep breath. Then she walked across the floor, not toward the exit, but to a seat at the front table. Mr. Gaines pulled the chair out for her. For the first time all evening, Rosa sat down, not as a guest in someone else's world, but as someone who belonged. And this time, no one questioned it. People came up to her slowly. Some just smiled. Others said thank you. One young man, and, in turn, leaned down and whispered, "I hope to work like you someday." Rosa looked up at him with kind eyes. "Then don't work for praise," she said. "Work with pride." He nodded, taking those words with him like a gift. The room had changed, not in color or sound, but in feeling. The air felt lighter, honest, real. That night, Rosa didn't give a speech. She didn't tell her story in a microphone. But the story had already been told, through her presence, her grace, and her quiet power. They had laughed when she arrived. Now they listened when she said nothing. And that was the turning point. The clapping had stopped. The music returned, soft and slow, like it was finally playing for the right reason. But the mood in the room had shifted completely. People were no longer looking through Rosa, they were looking at her, really seeing her. And what they saw wasn't just a woman in a beautiful navy dress. It was strength, patience, dignity. She didn't try to own the space. She didn't need to. Her presence alone had already changed it. Across the room, someone stood up. It was Leonard Mallory. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his tie, then walked toward her, slower than before. He wasn't smiling now. Not fake, not proud. His face was tight, unreadable. For a moment, the room held its breath. He stopped in front of her table. Rosa looked up, meeting his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "The invitation, I didn't think you'd come. And when you did, I didn't treat you with respect." Rosa looked at him. Not angry, not smug, just listening. Leonard cleared his throat. "That was wrong of me." There was no dramatic pause. No applause. Just silence and a slow nod from Rosa. "I know," she said softly. He gave the smallest smile almost to himself. Then, without another word, he walked away, back into the crowd, this time a little smaller. That moment, it mattered more than any speech could have. Then came the ripple. People started coming up to Rosa one at a time. A woman in a silver dress leaned down. "You were always kind to me," even when I didn't say thank you. I'm sorry for that. I hope you'll forgive me. Rosa nodded. Of course. A young man came next. I didn't know you read books. I thought. He stopped himself. That was unfair. Do you have any favorites? She smiled. I like stories about people who keep going. Me too, he said, then paused. Can I sit? She nodded again. He pulled up a chair, just listening. Then came the florist, the one who always dropped off centerpieces without a word. You always watered the flowers when no one else did. I noticed. I just never said anything. Rosa looked down at the table. One of the arrangements sat in front of her, soft blue. Hydrangeas, her favorite. She gently touched a petal. They're easy to care for if you pay attention. She wasn't preaching. She was just speaking. And people were listening. For the first time in that room, they weren't trying to impress. They were trying to understand. Even the servers began moving differently. Not rushed, not nervous, but with quiet respect. One of them handed Rosa a glass of sparkling water. On the house, she whispered with a grin. Rosa took it with a thank you, raising the glass slightly in a silent toast. The night wore on, but no one forgot the moment. The energy stayed gentle, real. Conversations grew softer. Laughter came more naturally. Someone asked Rosa what kept her going all these years. She thought for a second. People. Even when they don't see you, they still need you. There was no pride in her voice. Just truth. By the end of the evening, the seats near Rosa were full. Not just with guests, with people who wanted to learn something about humility, about strength, about what it really means to show up. And Rosa? She didn't change. She wasn't trying to be someone else. She wasn't wearing power like a crown. She was simply being herself, the same way she always had. Calm, thoughtful, steady. But now the world around her had caught up. Now they saw her. Not the cleaner, not the background, but the woman who had walked through their world with quiet grace and never once asked for praise. She didn't need to, because respect once earned honestly stays. The next morning, the ballroom was quiet again. The lights were off. The chairs were empty. The soft footprints from the night before had been swept away. But something had changed. It wasn't just the air, it was the way people looked at the space now. The way they walked in. The way they paused, just for a second, like they were entering something sacred. And in the corner, Rosa stood holding a clipboard, not a mop. She had been offered a new role that very night. Mr. Gaines had found her before the party ended. He waited until most guests had gone, then approached her, gentle and respectful. You've always been the heart of this place, he said. Now I'd like others to learn from that heart. He asked her to take on a new position, one that would oversee staff training, guest experience, and team culture. She wouldn't just clean rooms anymore. She would lead people, show them how to work with pride, care, and quiet strength. At first, Rosa hesitated. Change wasn't something she chased. But this offer didn't come from pity or charity. Came from truth. She accepted not because she wanted power, but because she wanted to make sure no one else ever felt as invisible as she once had. And so here she was. The staff meeting that morning was different. Rosa stood at the front of the room, the same room where she used to sit in the back, unnoticed. Now everyone listened. She spoke simply. I know how hard this job can be. I know what it feels like when guests walk past you, or when no one says thank you. But the work we do, it matters. Heads nodded slowly. She continued, we don't just clean rooms. We create peace. We prepare rest. We fix what's broken before anyone else notices. There was no applause, just something better, understanding. Rosa walked the halls that day, not with a bucket, but with a pen and notebook. She checked in on staff. She noticed things, crooked sign, a broken light, a nervous trainee. She helped, not by giving orders but by showing what care looks like in action. The younger workers followed her quietly, watching how she spoke, how she moved, how she made every space feel a little more human. Even the guests noticed. They started asking about the woman with the calm smile and navy dress. Some left notes at the front desk. Please tell Rosa thank you. And on her desk, once an empty spot by the laundry room, flowers began to appear. One guest left a card that read, "You made this place feel like home." By the end of the week, Rosa had written a new handbook for staff. It wasn't full of rules. It was full of values. Respect, kindness, patience, pride. She called it the Quiet Code. The hotel adopted it fully. Every new worker received it on day one. And on the first page, in soft, bold letters, was a single sentence. Your work matters, even when no one sees it. But now, people did see it. They saw her, and not just in the hotel. One day, she was invited to speak at a small community event. Then a local news outlet wrote about her. Schools began asking her to speak with students. Not about cleaning, but about character. She never tried to become famous. She never chased titles. But she did keep showing up fully, with love and discipline. Her presence started planting seeds. Other hotels reached out to her for advice. Staff members stayed longer, worked better, smiled more. The system, once stiff and top-down, now breathed thanks to Rosa's steady hands. She had once been the woman no one invited. Now she was the one everyone turned to. Still, Rosa didn't change much. She wore simple shoes, carried a notebook, brought tea to work, and every now and then, she'd walk the ballroom floor after hours, checking the little things. Crooked chair, a smudge on the mirror, a napkin folded with care. Because to her, the small things still mattered. That was her gift. That's what stayed with people long after the party ended. Not noise, not pride, but a quiet, lasting kind of grace. And so, Rosa's story didn't end with applause. It ended with something softer, the kind of peace that comes from being seen, being valued, and finally being exactly where you're meant to be. Have you ever been overlooked? Have you worked hard, stayed kind, stayed honest, but felt like no one noticed? Maybe you've done your best for years without asking for praise. Maybe you've helped others shine while standing quietly in the background. So, this story was for you. Rosa's journey reminds us that quiet strength is still strength. That showing up with care, day after day, even when no one claps, matters. And that your value isn't measured by how loud you are, but by how true you stay to yourself. There are so many Rosas in the world. Maybe you are one of them. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever kept going without thanks, we see you, and we thank you. Tell us, have you ever been in Rosa's shoes? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if the story touched your heart, help us share it. Like, comment, and subscribe, not just for us, but for all the quiet heroes out there waiting to be seen. You matter, and your story does too.